What's up, guys? Welcome to another classic Nathen recap video where today we're going to go over the novel Force and Shadow by Megan Haskell. Before I start, I just want to give a couple shout outs. I want to first thank Megan for being the first author of the new year of 2026 to collaborate with us for BookBase Gold. And I also want to thank you guys, the fans, for not only checking out our content on social media thus far, but also coming by to an in-person interview that we had a couple weeks ago where I interviewed Megan on this novel. And I just want to say, you guys have no idea how much it means to us to see that much support pull up in person to support us, while we just talk about books. So I just want to say again, thank you guys so much. This really means a lot, and yeah, let's keep it going. So Megan's book, Force and Shadow, is actually an epic fantasy novel that serves as a prequel to her action-adventure series, The Senyari Chronicles. And I do want to note that before we get into everything, no, I didn't get a chance to read the Senyari Chronicles, so I didn't go in with that much context, but the good news is that is not needed. The first thing that I want to talk about is Megan's ability to world build, creating environments that carry such an amazing depth of detail that goes for every location in the novel. This ranges from the rowdy, loud taverns that characters try having conversations in, to the luscious, quiet gardens that these same characters go to if they need a moment of peace. There's gold, flashy architecture that symbolizes the power of the High Elf Kingdom that hosts a very power-hungry king, and then right after you see the contrast with a darker toned, ash-ridden land that is very much descriptive of the Dark Elf area, and this realm is where we see the opposing king, King Rinde. The amount of detail that's in this novel just made it so easy for me to be immersed in this book, but that just didn't come out of thin air. Megan did a lot of research to make sure she knew what she was doing, whether this meant to, juggle around notebooks that carried lore that pertained to her last series and making sure she stayed consistent with, the world and the rules that it needs to follow, to even contacting a blacksmith to understand how to forge a sword. Yes, she contacted a blacksmith to learn how to forge a sword.
So with regard to the blacksmith, yeah, I've never made a sword, right? And this is important in the story. It's a key piece of the story is that they're forging this sword. So I had to find someone who knew what they were talking about. So I did. I researched. I just Googled online to find someone who knew, was a local blacksmith, and she's actually based. Well, I met her originally in Dana Point. There was it was the Tall Ships Festival in Dana Point, and they had sort of like this old town, historical reenactment kind of vibe, like little craftspeople center area, and they had a tent there for these people who do classical blacksmithing, classical iron forging and making, metal stuff. And so I asked them if there was someone I could talk to, and I found her.
Besides that point of world building, I think there's another point that I want to make with this book that kind of pertains to the characters themselves and why I see them as so special. Before I say anything though, let me first give context. When I first started reading this book, I was looking at things through the perspective of the son of a notable blacksmith. This son is an epic failure, and not because he's just not a good son, it's because he's not gifted with the same talents that his father has. His father's really good at making swords and forging and doing anything in the blacksmith area, while this guy is very much more of a fighter. He doesn't do the best at making these weapons, he's really good at being able to use them. I thought this was really cool because I thought that this perspective was a perspective being used to kind of explain the world without having a narrator do it instead. You keep on reading the book and then you just realize okay, this character is clearly inept to, whatever his family needs him to do, but at the same time though, he's somehow in the room to kind of witness some of the great events that's leading to this oncoming war that's constantly teased in this book. And it's until you get halfway through the book, you start realizing wait a minute, this character keeps on reappearing. I think he's the main character. Another perspective that you see is one of a princess that has narcissistic traits, and she's trying to also play her hand in how the outcome of this battle that's later eventually going to happen, to see how this ends up becoming more favorable in her side. We learn about this princess, but then we also see the perspective of her seamstress, Lewin, who is somebody that's more quiet, more timid, and kind of just specializes in helping the princess through her magic. But again, you see another example where the perspective just keeps on going towards the seamstress, and then bam, you realize like, oh crap, this is another main character. The point that I'm trying to make is that, you see this heavy plot point, which is this really big war that's bound to happen. You see tensions rising, the kingdoms aren't getting along, and you see this all unfolding through the eyes of people that you wouldn't really think twice about. In this world that Megan builds with all these kingdoms, you get the vibe right away that these characters are not seen as important at all by any means. Nobody bats an eye towards them in the world that is being created in this book, but that's why the moments where these characters step up and end up taking the mantle as that, stereotypical main character trope, that's why it feels so good when you see these characters do something that's just crazy. Yes, it is the classic trope of a nobody becoming a somebody, but in this situation, I kind of saw this in a more genuine lens because, you kind of just realize through seeing these characters that if you want to be heroic, you only really just need conviction. These characters aren't really heroes through their ability to naturally stand out. There's not a marker that just screams at you that says, hey, you need to pay attention to these characters, they're a big deal. But it's through their choices to do good when they're kind of forced to be subordinates to whatever's happening around them that kind of reminds us that, these guys are a lot more stronger than you initially think. And I think that's such a great message for this book to kind of carry and to kind of end with. It's that, if you want to do heroic deeds, you don't need to be the buffest person in the room, you don't need to be the smartest, but in moments where you feel pressure to do something that is wrong and you see it as wrong, you can be a hero by just having that strong will to say, hey, even in moments where I feel an immense pressure to follow something, I'm going to stand my ground and do what I believe is best. And that's what I really love about these characters. And, I know that's a lot to digest, but, in summary, I think Forged in Shadow is a great novel to read. I'll definitely share my thoughts on the sequel once I get my hands on it, but for those that kind of want to obtain their copy of either the book that I was just talking about or the sequel, feel free to check out Megan's website at meganhaskell.com. And as always, if you enjoy this content, please go ahead and like our video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Blue Sky. Also check out Megan's socials as well. And, I will see you guys for the next video where I break down another novel. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.